I'm sorry. I wore my work uniform." The words tumbled out before Kelsey Hart could stop them. She stood beside the booth in Taco Libre, still in wrinkled hospital scrubs, hair half fallen from a bun that had survived a 12-hour ER shift. Across the table sat the man she had kept waiting for 45 minutes. Kelsey's chest tightened. This was exactly how every failed relationship of her adult life had begun, late, exhausted, apologizing. "I know this looks terrible," she rushed on, cheeks burning. "I should have canceled, but we had a trauma case and I couldn't leave. And then I thought about going home to change, but that would have made me even later and—" "Hey." The word was quiet, firm. Dylan Carter stood up slowly from the booth. For a terrifying second, Kelsey thought he was leaving. Instead, he raised a gentle hand like he was stopping traffic. "Stop apologizing." Kelsey blinked. "I just spent the last hour ruining your night," she said weakly. Dylan studied her, really studied her. The faint exhaustion in her eyes, the coffee stain on her sleeve, the hospital badge clipped crookedly to her pocket. Then he said something that completely shattered her expectations. "You were saving someone's life," he said calmly. "That sounds like a pretty good reason to be late." The tension inside her chest faltered. Dylan gestured toward the seat. "Sit down before you pass out." Still stunned, Kelsey slid into the booth. 2 minutes later, Dylan returned with a glass of water and a margarita. "Water first," he said. "You look dehydrated." She stared at him. Men didn't usually do this. They usually complained about her schedule, or the hours, or the fact that she always smelled faintly like antiseptic. Dylan leaned back, watching her carefully. "So," he said, "motorcycle accident. Did he make it?" Kelsey froze, not because of the question, but because of the genuine concern in his voice. For the first time that night, she felt something dangerous stir inside her chest. Hope. And she had no idea yet that this man and the little girl, waiting at home for him, would soon change her entire life. But across the restaurant window, a pair of curious eyes had already noticed them, and those eyes belonged to someone who did not want Kelsey anywhere near Dylan Carter. She didn't realize someone had been watching, not while Dylan asked gentle questions about the accident, not while Kelsey slowly finished the glass of water he insisted she drink first, and not while the tight knot of embarrassment inside her chest began to loosen. Across the restaurant, however, a woman stood near the bar with her arms folded. Her sharp eyes remained fixed on the booth by the window. Rachel Carter knew Dylan anywhere, even from across a crowded room, and the sight of him laughing softly with a tired woman in hospital scrubs made something cold tighten in her chest. She wasn't supposed to feel that reaction. After all, she had been the one who left. At the booth, Kelsey had finally started breathing normally again. Dylan pushed the basket of street tacos toward her. "You should eat before you fall asleep mid-sentence," he said lightly. She gave a nervous laugh. "That has actually happened on a date before." "Then I'm honored you're still conscious." The warmth in his voice made her glance up. For a brief moment their eyes held. There was something steady about him, something grounded, not flashy, not arrogant, just solid. It made her stomach flip in a way she hadn't expected. "So how long have you been an ER nurse?" Dylan asked. 5 years. "And you still show up for dates after shifts like that?" "I almost didn't tonight." He tilted his head. "Why?" Kelsey hesitated, because every other man eventually decided her job was too much. Because exhaustion and unpredictable schedules always ruined things. But she didn't say that. Instead, she shrugged softly. "Bad first impressions." Dylan shook his head. Saving someone's life isn't a bad first impression. The words landed deeper than he probably realized. Kelsey looked down at the table. Before she could answer, a shadow fell across the booth. A woman's voice spoke behind them. Cool, controlled. "Dylan." Both of them turned, and the moment Kelsey saw the expression on Dylan's face, shock, tension, something dangerously unresolved, she realized this night had just become far more complicated. Because the woman standing beside their table was the last person Dylan ever expected to see again. But Dylan didn't stand up. For a long moment he simply stared at the woman beside the table. "Rachel." The name came out low, controlled. Kelsey immediately felt the tension ripple through the air like a sudden storm rolling in. Rachel Carter looked exactly like the kind of woman who belonged in places nicer than Taco Libre, perfect hair, designer coat, the confidence of someone used to walking into rooms and owning them. Her gaze slid briefly to Kelsey's wrinkled scrubs. One eyebrow lifted. "So this is why you didn't answer my calls?" Kelsey stiffened. Dylan leaned back slowly, his voice calm but firm. "You shouldn't be here." Rachel ignored that. "I came to talk about Piper." At the mention of his daughter, Dylan's expression hardened. "What about her?" Rachel crossed her arms. I'm back in Austin. The words hung in the air like a dropped glass. For a moment, Dylan didn't react at all. Then he laughed once, short and disbelieving. You left 5 years ago. Yes. And now you just show up? Rachel's voice remained steady. I want to see my daughter. Kelsey's chest tightened. She suddenly felt like an intruder in someone else's life, a stranger sitting in the middle of something far more complicated than a first date. Dylan ran a hand through his dark hair. You disappeared when she was 2, Rachel. I wasn't ready to be a mother. And now you are? Rachel's gaze flicked toward Kelsey again. People change. Silence fell over the table. The warm ease of the evening had vanished completely. Kelsey slowly reached for her purse. This seems like something you two should talk about alone. Dylan's eyes snapped back to her. No. The word came faster than expected. His hand moved across the table, lightly touching her wrist. Don't go. The contact sent a quiet jolt through her. Rachel noticed, and the faintest smile touched her lips. Well, she said smoothly. This just got interesting. Rachel's faint smile lingered, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Kelsey immediately sensed something dangerous beneath it. I didn't realize you were entertaining, Rachel said, her gaze drifting over Kelsey's scrubs again. The implication hung in the air. Kelsey straightened slightly. Dylan's hand tightened gently around her wrist before he released it. Rachel, he said quietly, not tonight. Rachel ignored him. Instead, she pulled a folded document from her purse and placed it on the table. I didn't come here to argue. Dylan looked down at the paper. Something inside him visibly hardened. What is this? A petition. For what? Rachel's voice remained calm. For shared custody of Piper. The words hit the table like a dropped knife. Kelsey felt the temperature of the room change. Dylan didn't even touch the paper. You vanished for 5 years? I explained why. You abandoned her. Rachel's jaw tightened slightly. I was 22 and drowning. I made mistakes. And now you want to fix them with paperwork? Rachel leaned forward slightly. I want a relationship with my daughter. Dylan's voice dropped lower. You don't get to walk back into her life whenever it's convenient. Across the booth, Kelsey sat frozen. The tacos between them had gone completely untouched. Rachel's eyes slid toward her again. And who exactly are you? She asked. The question wasn't curious. It was strategic. Kelsey hesitated. I'm just... My girlfriend, Dylan said firmly. The word stunned her. Rachel's smile sharpened. How serious? Dylan finally picked up the document. His eyes moved across the lines. Then his expression changed. Not anger, something darker. Disbelief. He looked back at Rachel slowly. You're asking for primary custody. Rachel's silence was answer enough. Kelsey felt her stomach drop. Rachel hadn't returned to reconnect with Piper. She had returned to take her, and Dylan's quiet voice carried a warning now. If you think you're walking back into her life and ripping her away from me. His jaw tightened. You've made a very big mistake. Rachel's expression barely changed, but the air around the table had turned brittle. I'm not trying to rip Piper away from you, she said smoothly. Dylan gave a quiet, humorless laugh. You're filing for primary custody. That's what my lawyer recommended. The word lawyer landed like another blow. Kelsey felt a heavy discomfort settle in her chest. This was no longer an awkward interruption. This was war. Dylan slowly folded the document and pushed it back across the table. You've been gone 5 years. I know. You missed birthdays. First day of school. Every nightmare she woke up crying from. Rachel's voice softened slightly. I want to fix that. You don't fix 5 years by taking her away from the only parent she's ever known. For the first time, Rachel's calm mask cracked. I'm her mother, and I'm the one who stayed. Silence. Heavy. Painful. Kelsey suddenly felt like she was witnessing something far too personal. She reached for her purse again. Dylan, I really should... His hand moved again, stopping her gently. Please stay. His voice was quieter this time, and beneath the strength in it, she heard something else. Fear. Rachel noticed it too. Her eyes flicked between them. You're involving your date in family matters now? She's not just a date. Kelsey's heart stumbled. Dylan turned toward her fully now. I'm sorry you got pulled into this tonight. She shook her head slowly. You don't have to apologize. The word surprised even her, because suddenly she understood something. The calm strength she had seen earlier, the quiet patience, the steady kindness. It wasn't accidental. It came from years of carrying responsibilities alone. Rachel stood up slowly. We'll settle this in court. Dylan's jaw tightened again. Rachel glanced down at Kelsey one final time. Careful, she said softly. Single fathers come with complicated baggage. Then she walked away. The moment she disappeared through the restaurant door, the tension inside Dylan finally cracked. He leaned forward slightly, rubbing his face, and Kelsey saw the exhaustion there, the kind that had nothing to do with long work hours. For several seconds after Rachel left, neither of them spoke. The restaurant noise slowly crept back in, dishes clinking, music playing softly, but inside the booth the world felt strangely quiet. Dylan stared down at the table like he was replaying the last 5 minutes in his head. Kelsey finally broke the silence. You didn't have to say I was your girlfriend. Her voice was gentle. Careful. Dylan looked up immediately. I'm sorry about that. He rubbed the back of his neck. That was probably unfair to you. Kelsey studied him for a moment. You were protecting yourself. And you? His answer came quickly. Rachel's warning still echoed in the air. Single fathers come with complicated baggage. Kelsey felt a small, unexpected sting in her chest. I'm not scared of complicated, she said quietly. Dylan held her gaze. Something softened in his expression. You might be after tonight. She almost smiled. I work in an ER. That actually made him laugh. The tension cracked just slightly, but it didn't disappear. Dylan glanced toward the door Rachel had walked through. She's never tried to come back before. Why now? I don't know. The uncertainty in his voice was unsettling, because it meant he truly hadn't seen this coming. Kelsey hesitated. Then she asked the question sitting heavily in her chest. Does Piper know her mom is back? Dylan's face tightened. No. And the court thing? She hasn't filed yet. That paper was just a warning. Kelsey exhaled slowly. That's a lot. Yeah. For a moment they simply looked at each other across the table. Their first date had somehow turned into a conversation about custody battles and broken families. Kelsey suddenly felt something unexpected. Not fear, protectiveness. For him, for the little girl she hadn't even met yet. Dylan noticed the shift in her expression. You don't have to get pulled into this. His voice was quiet. You can still run while this is just one very weird first date. Kelsey leaned back slightly, thinking. Then she said something that surprised both of them. I don't usually run. And the way Dylan looked at her after that made the air between them suddenly feel much warmer. But Kelsey didn't realize how serious things were about to become. The restaurant had almost emptied by the time. Their food finally grew cold between them. Neither of them had touched it. Dylan leaned back in the booth, watching her quietly. You're handling this way better than most people would. Kelsey shrugged slightly. Honestly? Yeah. I'm still trying to process the fact that your ex-wife just showed up and tried to take your daughter in the middle of our first date. Dylan gave a tired smile. Fair point. For a moment their eyes met again. The tension between them had changed. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was deeper, more personal. Kelsey hesitated before speaking again. Piper, how old is she? 7. His voice softened immediately. She's smart. Too smart sometimes. A faint warmth appeared in his expression. She likes drawing dinosaurs even though she says they're technically extinct reptiles and not monsters. Kelsey smiled before she could stop herself. She sounds amazing. She is. Silence settled between them again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that forms when two strangers suddenly begin understanding each other. Kelsey traced the rim of her water glass. Rachel coming back? That must scare you. Dylan didn't answer right away. Then he admitted quietly, yeah. The honesty in his voice landed deeper than anything else he had said that night. I've spent 5 years trying to make sure Piper never feels abandoned. He continued, and now the person who left her just walks back in like none of that happened. Kelsey felt a sharp ache in her chest. Without thinking, she reached across the table. Her fingers lightly touched his hand. I'm sorry. The contact froze both of them. Dylan looked down at their hands, then back at her. For a moment, it felt like the entire restaurant disappeared. His voice lowered. Kelsey, I know this is crazy timing, but He stopped himself. Something almost spoken. Something dangerous. Something neither of them were ready for yet. Because just then Dylan's phone buzzed on the table, and the name on the screen made his expression instantly darken. Rachel Carter. But Dylan didn't answer the call. He stared at the phone for a moment, then flipped it face down on the table. Kelsey raised an eyebrow slightly. You're ignoring her? For tonight, he said quietly. The calm in his voice felt deliberate, like someone trying very hard to hold the line. Kelsey leaned back slightly in the booth. Is that going to make things worse? Dylan exhaled slowly. Probably. The honesty of the answer made her smile faintly. But the moment didn't last, because the phone buzzed again, and this time it wasn't a call. It was a text. The screen lit up between them. Rachel Carter, you should read the documents more carefully. Dylan frowned and turned the phone toward himself. Another message followed immediately. I didn't come back alone. Kelsey felt a cold ripple move through her chest. What does that mean? Dylan didn't answer right away. His eyes moved slowly across the screen. Then something in his expression shifted. A deep, dangerous realization. What? Kelsey asked softly. He looked up. She's engaged. Kelsey blinked. Okay. Dylan pushed the phone across the table so she could see the photo Rachel had sent. A man stood beside Rachel, tall, sharp suit, confident smile, the kind of man who looked like he lived inside courtrooms. Under the photo was a short message. Meet my fiancé, Michael Turner, family attorney. Kelsey's stomach dropped. Wait. Dylan finished the thought for her. Rachel didn't just come back to reconnect with Piper. His voice had turned quiet, controlled. She came back prepared. The realization settled heavily between them. Lawyers, custody papers, a sudden reappearance after 5 years. Rachel hadn't returned out of guilt or regret. She had returned with a plan. Kelsey slowly looked back at Dylan. What are you going to do? Dylan didn't hesitate. His answer came with quiet certainty. Protect my daughter. Then his gaze softened as it moved back to her. But you should walk away before this pulls you in. Kelsey's heart tightened, because somehow, walking away suddenly felt impossible. But Kelsey didn't leave. Even after everything Dylan had just told her, even after the picture of Rachel and her lawyer fiancé still glowed faintly on the phone screen, instead she sat there quietly, thinking. Finally she asked, what does Piper know about her mom? Dylan leaned back slowly. Very little. His voice carried the weight of careful parenting. I told her Rachel moved away when she was little. That sometimes adults make choices they regret later. Kelsey nodded slowly. And now? Now I have to explain why the person who left suddenly wants to be part of her life again. He ran a hand through his hair. That's the part that scares me. Kelsey understood immediately. Not the legal battle, not the paperwork, the emotional damage. Rachel could walk back into Piper's life and then disappear again. The thought made Kelsey's chest tighten. Before she could respond, Dylan's phone buzzed again. Another message from Rachel. This one was shorter. Court filing goes in tomorrow morning. Dylan's jaw tightened. Kelsey watched the shift in his expression. Tomorrow? Yeah. That's fast. Rachel never does anything slowly. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. This means lawyers, hearings, investigations. Then his eyes lifted to her. And if we keep seeing each other, you'll get pulled into that. Kelsey hesitated. The warning in his voice was genuine, not dramatic, not manipulative, just honest. You barely know me, Dylan continued quietly. You don't deserve to get dragged into a custody fight. The words were meant to protect her, but they landed differently than he expected. Kelsey straightened slightly. I'm not made of glass. I didn't say you were. You're assuming I can't handle difficult things. Dylan held her gaze. You just walked into my life 2 hours ago. Kelsey didn't look away. Sometimes 2 hours is enough to know something matters. The words hung between them, heavy, dangerously honest. And for a moment, Dylan looked like he might say something that would change everything, but instead he whispered, Kelsey, this is about to get really messy. Kelsey knew he was right. The quiet certainty in Dylan's voice wasn't fear. It was experience. He had already spent years protecting Piper from instability, from disappointment, from people who might not stay. And now Rachel was back with lawyers and court papers. This wasn't just complicated. It was dangerous for anyone standing too close. Kelsey slowly picked up her purse. Dylan noticed immediately. Kelsey. She forced a small smile. You're right. The words were harder to say than she expected. You need to focus on Piper. His expression tightened. That's not what I meant. But it's what you meant, she said softly. Kelsey stood up from the booth. For a moment she looked down at him, the man who had been kind to her when every other man had treated her job like an inconvenience, the man who had made her feel respected in a single evening, more than some people had in months. And somehow, that made this harder. I don't want to make your life more complicated, she said quietly. Dylan stood up quickly. You're not. But she shook her head. You said it yourself. Lawyers, custody battles, investigations. Kelsey had worked in emergency medicine long enough to understand something important. When someone you care about is in danger, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is step back. You barely know me, she reminded him gently. But Piper is your entire world. Dylan didn't argue. He just watched her. His eyes were intense now. "Are you sure this is what you want?" Kelsey hesitated. For one brief second her resolve cracked. Then she nodded. "It's probably better if tonight stays. Just a first date." The words tasted bitter. Dylan's jaw tightened. "Yeah," he said quietly. They stood there awkwardly beside the booth, neither moving, neither really wanting to leave. Finally, Kelsey stepped toward the exit. And just before she reached the door, Dylan's voice followed her. Soft, almost regretful. "I think we might have met at the wrong time." Kelsey paused, but she didn't turn around, because if she did, she wasn't sure she'd have the strength to walk away. But walking away didn't make the feeling disappear. For the next 2 weeks, Kelsey tried to convince herself she had made the right choice. She buried herself in hospital shifts, 12 hours, sometimes 14. The ER became her safe place again. Controlled chaos, predictable emergencies, patients she could help. But every quiet moment betrayed her, because her phone stayed silent. No morning texts, no random jokes about job sites, no messages asking if she had eaten anything besides vending machine snacks. And the absence of those things hurt more than she expected. Across the city, Dylan was having the same problem, except his days were filled with lawyers instead of hospital monitors. Rachel had officially filed for custody, just like she promised. His attorney warned him the process could take months: home inspections, background checks, interviews. It was exhausting, but Dylan didn't regret a single step of fighting for Piper. The only thing he regretted was letting Kelsey walk out of that restaurant. One evening, Piper sat at the kitchen, table drawing dinosaurs, while Dylan stared at a pile of legal papers. The 7-year-old looked up suddenly. "Dad?" "Yeah, Bug? Where's Nurse Kelsey?" The simple question caught him off guard. "She's busy with work." Piper squinted at him suspiciously. "That's not a real answer." Dylan rubbed the back of his neck. "We just met at a bad time." Piper thought about that for a moment. Then she said something that hit him harder than any lawyer's argument. "You always tell me when something's important. You shouldn't give up just because it's hard." Dylan froze. His daughter shrugged casually. "So why did you give up on her?" 2 nights later, outside the hospital employee exit, Kelsey stepped into the cool night air after another long shift. She stopped suddenly, because a familiar truck was parked near the curb, and leaning against the driver's door was Dylan Carter. But Kelsey didn't move at first. For a moment she simply stood there beneath the pale glow of the hospital lights, her bag hanging loosely from her shoulder. "Dylan." His name came out softer than she meant. He pushed himself off the truck slowly. "Hey." There was something different in his expression tonight. Not the tension from their first date, something steadier, like a decision had already been made. "You shouldn't be here," Kelsey said gently. "That's funny," Dylan replied. "Because that's exactly what my daughter said about you." Kelsey blinked. "Piper?" He nodded. "She asked why I gave up on someone important." "Just because things got complicated." The words landed straight in her chest. Dylan stepped closer. "I've spent 2 weeks dealing with lawyers and paperwork and every possible worst-case scenario Rachel could throw at me. And the entire time I kept thinking about the woman who showed up late in wrinkled scrubs and still managed to make that night the best first date I've had in years." Kelsey felt her throat tighten. "You're in the middle of a custody fight." "I know. You have a daughter to protect." "I know. And your life is about to get messy." Dylan smiled slightly. "It already is." For a moment neither of them spoke. Then he said quietly, "I'm not asking you to carry that with me." Kelsey looked up at him. "But I am asking if you'd like to be part of my life anyway." The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. Because this time, he wasn't trying to protect her by pushing her away. He was simply telling the truth. Kelsey took a slow breath. Then she said something she had spent years learning how to believe. "I'm tired of apologizing for existing." Dylan's smile softened. "Good." She stepped closer. "Because I'd really like to see where this goes." His relief was immediate, warm, real. And when he pulled her into a quiet hug outside the hospital doors, Kelsey realized something important. The right person doesn't ask you to be smaller. They simply make room for you exactly as you are.